19. Terrible things done to black actors. What if I told you the first black person ever to win an Oscar was seated at a table against the back wall while her white co-stars celebrated up front? That one of the most gifted Americans who ever lived had his passport seized for 8 years by his own government? That the first black woman nominated for Best Actress died with about $2 in her bank account? And that 24 years after Halle Berry made history, no black woman has won that award again? These 19 artists didn't fail. They were failed. Deliberately. Systematically. Stay to the end, because the last name will stay with you. And subscribe to Secret Celebrity Stories, where the truth behind the legends comes to light. Sidney Poitier. For an entire era, Sidney Poitier was the only blackface Hollywood would permit in leading man territory. And even then, the industry paid him a fraction of what it paid the white stars beside him. Born in Miami in 1927 to Bahamian tomato farmers, he arrived 2 months premature and so small that his parents reportedly prepared a shoebox for his burial. He survived, grew up poor in the Bahamas, and landed in New York at 15 with $3, teaching himself to read from newspapers between dishwashing shifts. In 1964, he became the first black man ever to win the Academy Award for Best Actor for Lilies of the Field. Yet across the 1960s, while he was among the highest-grossing box office draws in America, industry estimates suggest his per-picture fee ran roughly half of what comparably popular white leading men like Paul Newman or Steve McQueen commanded. And the indignity ran deeper than money. Hollywood systematically denied him on-screen romance with white actresses, despite his global star power. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967 built its entire premise on interracial marriage, and was deliberately filmed without a single passionate kiss, its makers terrified of Southern theater owners. That same year, he anchored In the Heat of the Night, whose "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs" still echoes, and To Sir, with Love. 3 films in 12 months made him the conscience of American cinema. He later directed the highest-grossing comedy of its year, served as Bahamian ambassador to Japan, and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The man who broke every barrier never once received the salary, the romance, or the casting range his white peers were simply handed. James Earl Jones. The most recognizable voice in the history of American cinema, spent decades being honored too late by the industry it helped build. Born in Arcaboutla, Mississippi in 1931, he stuttered so severely as a boy that he was effectively mute for years, speaking again only after a teacher pushed him to recite poetry aloud. He earned his drama degree from the University of Michigan in 1955 and broke through on Broadway in Jean Genet's The Blacks. He won the Tony for Best Actor for The Great White Hope in 1969, playing boxer Jack Johnson, and earned an Oscar nomination for the 1970 film version. Then he gave the world 2 iconic voices, Darth Vader across the original Star Wars trilogy, and Mufasa in The Lion King. Here's the detail that stings. He went uncredited on the original 1977 Star Wars, at his own insistence, dismissing his contribution as special effects. In 1991, he won 2 competitive primetime Emmys in one night, and received the National Medal of Arts in 1992 and the Kennedy Center Honors in 2002. But his honorary Academy Award didn't arrive until 2011, when he was 80 years old and his health was already declining, decades after the performances that earned it. He died on September 9, 2024, at his home in Pawling, New York at 93. Hollywood waited until the man who voiced its most feared villain and its most beloved king could barely stand before it officially thanked him. The recognition was never in question, only the timing, and the timing said everything. An industry that used his voice to sell billions took 50 years to say his name from its own stage, and by then, the honor had curdled into an apology. Halle Berry. On March 24, 2002, Halle Berry made history that has still not been repeated. Her Best Actress win for Monsters Ball made her the first black woman ever to claim the award. And her sobbing acceptance speech, insisting the moment was bigger than herself, became one of the most replayed in Oscar history. Hollywood looked, for one night, like it had finally crossed a threshold. The reality proved brutal. Born in Cleveland in 1966, she won Miss Ohio USA in 1986 before breaking through in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever in 1991. Then Boomerang, Bulworth, and an Emmy-winning turn as Dorothy Dandridge in 1999, playing a woman whose story eerily foreshadowed her own. Then came the Oscar, and then came the silence. Berry has spoken openly across many interviews about a fact the industry never explains. Her asking price barely moved. White actresses who win Best Actress routinely see their per-picture fees leap by millions within 2 years. Hers rose only marginally. She took Catwoman in 2004, a notorious flop, in part because Warner Brothers offered $14 million, one of her few significant post-Oscar paydays. In a 2017 Teen Vogue interview, she said plainly that she had believed her win would open doors for other women of color, and that it hadn't. She was right. As of the 98th Academy Awards in March 2026, where Jessie Buckley won for Hamnet, no black woman has won Best Actress in the 24 years since. Halle Berry's historic night didn't shatter Hollywood's ceiling. It revealed exactly how thick that ceiling was, and how quickly the industry could celebrate a milestone while changing absolutely nothing underneath it. 24 years is not a fluke. 24 years is a pattern. Viola Davis. Viola Davis spent her entire career being told, in coded language, that she was too dark for the roles her talent had already earned. Born in St. Matthews, South Carolina in 1965, and raised in brutal poverty in Rhode Island. She earned her MFA from Juilliard in 1993, joined the Negro Ensemble Company, and won her first Tony in 2001 for King Hedley II, then a second for Fences in 2010. Her film Breakthrough in Doubt lasted roughly 8 minutes on screen, and earned an Academy Award nomination anyway. She followed with The Help, then her defining role as Annalise Keating on How to Get Away with Murder, becoming the first black woman ever to win the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a drama series. In 2017, she won Best Supporting Actress for Fences, and in 2023 completed EGOT status, joining barely 24 people in history. And still, the ceiling held. In her landmark 2014 New York Times profile, and repeatedly since, Davis described casting directors telling her she wasn't the right look. Industry shorthand, she has argued, for skin tone too dark for romantic leads or sophisticated heroines. In 2018, she told Variety something that should have ended the conversation. She named herself among the highest-grossing actresses alive, and said she still could not get paid like Meryl Streep or Julianne Moore. That's not a complaint about ego. It's arithmetic. Viola Davis has more hardware than almost anyone working, and she has spent her career fighting for the pay, the parts, and the plain dignity that were never once in doubt for her white peers. That fight is why the next generation of dark-skinned actresses will inherit a wider door than she did. Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson may be the most accomplished American his own country ever tried to erase. Born in Princeton, New Jersey in 1898, the son of an escaped slave turned minister, he graduated valedictorian from Rutgers, only the third black student ever admitted, then earned a law degree from Columbia while playing pro football in the early NFL. He reportedly spoke 12 languages. His 1943 Broadway Othello ran 296 performances, the longest Shakespeare run in Broadway history at the time, and his films made him a genuine global star. By the 1940s, he was earning around $150,000 a year, roughly $2.5 million in today's money. Then the United States government decided he was dangerous. Because he refused to stay quiet about American racism and voiced sympathy for socialist ideals, the State Department revoked his passport from 1950 to 1958, ending his international career. The FBI compiled over 1,000 pages of surveillance. Every major studio blacklisted him. Concerts were canceled, and record stores were pressured to pull his albums. His income collapsed to roughly $6,000 a year. The persecution broke his health. He suffered severe depression, reached a crisis point in Moscow in 1961, and underwent dozens of electroshock treatments in the decade after. He died in Philadelphia on January 23, 1976, after a stroke, at 77. His passing barely acknowledged by mainstream American newspapers. A generation of young Americans in 1976 had no idea who he was. That erasure, not the death, is the crime. History has since restored the honor his country worked so hard to strip from him, but restored it to a headstone. If any of this resonates with something you're carrying, please reach out to someone you trust. Cicely Tyson. For decades, Cicely Tyson chose unemployment over indignity, and paid for that choice in rent she couldn't make. Born in East Harlem in 1924, to immigrant parents from Nevis, she faced colorism from the very start, with casting directors citing her darker complexion as the reason roles went to lighter-skinned actresses. So she simply refused the only parts Hollywood offered black women: the maids, the exotic temptresses, the punchlines. Through the 1950s, she worked as a typist and a secretary, between rare dignified roles, going years without acting, rather than reinforce stereotypes that degraded black womanhood. Then came Sounder in 1972, where her sharecropper's wife earned an Academy Award nomination and permanently changed how Hollywood could portray rural black life, with interiority instead of caricature. 2 years later, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman had her aging from young enslaved woman to a 110-year-old civil rights witness, so convincingly that viewers wrote in believing Miss Jane was real. She won 2 Emmys. Across 7 decades, she collected the Kennedy Center Honors in 2015 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama in 2016. But here is the quiet cruelty. Her honorary Academy Award didn't come until 2018, when she was 93 years old. Hollywood spent 60 years watching her break barriers and refuse compromise, then waited until she was an elderly woman at the end of her strength to say thank you. She died on January 28, 2021, at 96, just 2 days after publishing her memoir. The recognition arrived, finally, with almost no time left to enjoy it. She spent a lifetime insisting black women be allowed dignity on screen, and won that argument decisively. It simply took Hollywood 6 decades to concede the point. Hattie McDaniel. February 29, 1940, should have been the proudest night in Hattie McDaniel's life. Instead, it became one of the most shameful evenings in Academy history. She had just become the first black person ever to win an Oscar for Gone with the Wind. But the ceremony was held at the Coconut Grove inside the Ambassador Hotel, a venue enforcing a strict no blacks policy. Producer David O. Selznick called in favors just to get her through the door, and once inside, she was seated at a small table against the back wall, apart from her white co-stars. Born in Wichita in 1893, she was the youngest of 13 children of formerly enslaved parents. She began performing at 6, and in 1931, became one of the first black women to broadcast on American radio. She appeared in over 300 films and received screen credit for roughly 80. When the NOSCOP pressured her to stop playing servants, she refused to apologize, answering with the line that defined her: she'd rather play a maid than be one, the difference being $700 a week versus 7. She died of breast cancer on October 26, 1952, at 57. Her dying wish to be buried at Hollywood Cemetery was denied under its whites-only policy, and the Oscar she left to Howard University later went missing and has never been recovered. A woman who made history was denied the room she made it in, the burial ground she asked for, and finally, even the trophy itself. It would be another 24 years before a black woman won a competitive acting Oscar again. The door she opened was never a door at all. It was a crack, and the industry spent decades leaning on it. Lena Horne. Lena Horne was Hollywood's beautiful prisoner. When MGM signed her to a long-term contract in 1942, She became one of the first black women ever given a major studio deal. And then the studio spent a decade refusing to develop her as an actress. Instead, MGM engineered something quietly grotesque. Her musical numbers were deliberately filmed as isolated set pieces, disconnected from the plot, so that Southern theater owners could physically cut her out of the reel without disturbing the story. She was designed to be removable. Born in Brooklyn in 1917, she was performing at Harlem's Cotton Club by 16, a venue where black entertainers played to whites-only crowds. And in 1940, she joined Charlie Barnett's all-white touring orchestra, among the first black women to integrate a major band. MGM cast her in Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather in 1943, both landmark all-black musicals. But her real chance, the role of the mixed-race Julie in Showboat in 1951, went instead to Ava Gardner, a white actress who darkened her skin to play it. Lena watched Hollywood choose a white woman in makeup over her. Her FBI file documented her activism. She funded NACA legal challenges, marched with Medgar Evers in Mississippi, and backed Eleanor Roosevelt's anti-lynching campaign. She was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, and her opportunities evaporated through the 1950s. Vindication came only in 1981, when her one-woman Broadway show, The Lady and Her Music, brought her Tony and Grammy recognition at last. She died in Manhattan on May 9, 2010, at 92. The woman who should have been Hollywood's greatest leading lady is remembered instead as the one they refused to let lead. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge wasn't merely denied opportunities. She was dismantled by a combination of racism, colorism, and exploitation that Hollywood never had to answer for. In 1955, she became the first black woman ever nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress, for Carmen Jones. That nomination should have detonated into international stardom. Instead, the industry offered her almost nothing worthy of her, and she turned down dozens of demeaning maid and slave roles that would have paid her bills, refusing to surrender the dignity she'd fought for. Born in Cleveland in 1922, she had performed since she was 4, touring the Jim Crow South with her sister, in venues where they couldn't use the bathrooms or eat in the restaurants where they sang. Her affair with Carmen Jones director Otto Preminger ended bitterly when he refused to leave his wife, and afterward he did not champion her for the leading roles he could have. Hollywood labeled her difficult for asking ordinary professional questions, a label white actresses making identical requests never carried. In Porgy and Bess, in 1959, her singing was dubbed against her wishes. Her losses compounded relentlessly. Her daughter Harolyn, born in 1943, required lifelong care that drained her finances, and a bitter divorce left her broke by 1963. On September 8, 1965, she was found dead at 42. The coroner officially ruled it an accidental overdose of an antidepressant. By reported accounts, she had about $2 left in her bank account. She was the brightest light Hollywood ever let go dark through sheer indifference. The final insult came decades later. Her life became a prestige biopic, proving there had always been an audience for her story. Hollywood simply waited until she couldn't collect on it. Pam Grier. Pam Grier became Hollywood's first black female action star, but only because the industry would celebrate black women's power exclusively when it came wrapped in hypersexualization. Born in Winston-Salem in 1949 into an Air Force family, she survived assaults as a child and again as a young woman, experiences she wrote about with remarkable courage in her 2010 memoir. She was studying in Denver, planning a medical career, when pageants pulled her toward film. Her break came with The Big Dollhouse in 1971, a women in prison exploitation picture. And then came the roles that made her legendary: Coffee in 1973 and Foxy Brown in 1974. The Foxy Brown poster became one of the most recognizable images of the entire decade. And the roles were genuinely complicated. Pam played intelligent, formidable women who dominated men and dispensed their own justice, but always filmed for the male gaze. Critics have argued ever since about whether her films represented black female empowerment or a more sophisticated form of objectification? And the honest answer may be both at once. What isn't ambiguous is what happened next. When blaxploitation collapsed in the late 1970s, Hollywood simply discarded her. She spent 2 decades in supporting television work before Quentin Tarantino resurrected her career with Jackie Brown in 1997. A Golden Globe-nominated performance that finally let audiences see the dramatic range that had been there the whole time. At 76, Pam Grier stands as proof of both Hollywood's brief willingness to let black women be powerful and its rigid insistence on dictating the terms of that power. She was never offered the choice between strength and dignity. The industry handed her one, withheld the other, then discarded her when the trend expired. Bill Bojangles Robinson. Bill Robinson was arguably the greatest tap dancer of the 20th century, and Hollywood would only let him be a servant to white children. Born Luther Robinson in Richmond, Virginia in 1878, to formerly enslaved parents who both died before he turned 8. He was raised by his grandmother and began dancing for coins in beer gardens at 6. He served as a rifleman in the Spanish-American War before building a vaudeville career, and his revolutionary stair dance, performed with impossible rhythmic precision, remains the most influential tap routine ever choreographed. He starred in the all-black Broadway hit Blackbirds of 1928 and toured the world to acclaim. He became the highest-paid black performer in America in the 1930s, earning roughly $6,500 a week at his peak. Yet the 4 films that made him famous to white America were his pictures opposite Shirley Temple, where he played the gentle, smiling servant who threatened no one. Hollywood denied him substantive dramatic work entirely. Stormy Weather in 1943, an all-black musical, was the closest he came to meaningful screen material. And he was 65 years old, treated as a charming relic rather than a leading man. He entertained American troops during the Second World War, then couldn't stay in many of the hotels where he performed. He was known as the honorary mayor of Harlem and gave away money for civil rights causes his whole life. When he died on November 25, 1949, at 71, over 32,000 people came to mourn him. And his estate was nearly bankrupt, exhausted by a lifetime of quiet generosity. The greatest dancer in cinema history died poor. Having earned a fortune the industry only let him spend on others. Diahann Carroll. In September 1968, Diahann Carroll did something no black woman had ever done. She starred in her own television series in a role that wasn't a stereotype. NBC's Julia cast her as a widowed nurse raising her young son, and it ran 3 seasons and 86 episodes, and she was attacked from both directions at once. White Southern affiliates threatened to drop the show entirely. Black viewers criticized Julia's middle-class life as too sanitized, too distant from real black experience. She was caught between racist resistance and impossible expectations, a burden no white actress in television history was ever asked to carry. Born Carol Deanne Johnson in the Bronx in 1935, she had already won the Tony for Best Actress in a Musical for No Strings in 1962. The first black woman ever to take that category. Even then, her chemistry with white co-star Richard Kiley drew off-screen rumors the industry actively discouraged. After Julia, her career stalled despite everything she'd proven. She earned a Best Actress Oscar nomination for Claudine in 1974, then faced years without meaningful offers, because Hollywood had almost nothing for an elegant black actress in her prime. Television brought her back as Dominique Devereaux on Dynasty from 1984 to 1987, glossy visibility far beneath her dramatic gifts. Later generations found her as Whitley Gilbert's formidable mother on A Different World, and as Jane Burke on Grey's Anatomy. She died on October 4, 2019, at 84. The barriers she broke never became the career she'd earned, because Hollywood treated her breakthrough as a favor granted rather than a talent noticed. A white actress with her resume, would have spent 30 years as a leading lady. She spent them waiting for the phone. John Boyega. On December 4, 2015, Disney revealed the marketing for Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and John Boyega, the franchise's new male lead, watched himself shrink. On posters in China, then the world's most lucrative film market, his image was dramatically reduced or removed altogether, a pattern repeated in other territories. Disney had calculated that some audiences wouldn't accept a black man as a Star Wars lead, and engineered his erasure to protect the gross. Born John Adedayo Adegboyega in Peckham, South London in 1992, to Nigerian parents, he trained at the Identity School of Acting and broke out in Attack the Block in 2011, before J.J. Abrams chose him as Finn. Then came the second erasure, the narrative one. Finn's arc, initially central to the trilogy, was diminished across The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. His screen time redirected toward Rey and Poe. His stormtrooper-turned resistance leader storyline traded for tangential material. In June 2020, at a Black Lives Matter rally in Hyde Park, Boyega delivered one of the most powerful addresses any Hollywood actor has given on police brutality, knowing it might cost him everything. Months later, in a British GQ interview, he named Disney directly. And here's the part usually left out. Disney leadership reached out afterward, and Boyega said publicly the conversation was a genuinely good one. He rebuilt on his own terms with the Woman King, and they cloned Tyrone. At 33, he remains one of the industry's sharpest critics, and the rare figure here who said it out loud while his career was still in front of him. Every name before him was silenced or gone before the truth could be spoken. Boyega said it into a microphone and kept working. Ethel Waters. On January 25, 1950, Ethel Waters became only the second black actress in history ever nominated for an Academy Award, recognized as Best Supporting Actress for Pinky. 9 full years had passed since Hattie McDaniel's win. Waters didn't win, and the nomination felt less like progress than like crumbs scattered to quiet demands for real equity. She was, by any measure, one of the most prodigiously gifted performers America ever produced. A singer, a dancer, a comedian, and a devastating dramatic actress. Hollywood denied her leading roles anyway. Born in Chester, Pennsylvania in 1896, she entered the world after her mother, then only 13, was assaulted, a fact Waters herself disclosed in her memoir with unflinching honesty. Raised by her grandmother in severe poverty, she began singing professionally at 17 and became one of the first black women to record commercially in 1921. Her 1933 recording of Stormy Weather became a defining song of the century, and her 1939 Broadway performance in Mamba's Daughters made her the first black woman ever to star in a Broadway dramatic play. Pinky should have launched a major film career. Instead, Hollywood essentially stopped calling once she passed 50. Despite worldwide fame, by the late 1950s she struggled to pay rent, lost her home to back taxes in 1960, and lived for years in hotel rooms while television provided most of her income. She converted to evangelical Christianity in 1957 and spent her final years touring with Billy Graham. She died on September 1, 1977, at 80. One of the most extraordinary talents this country ever produced, spent her final decades financially uncertain, not because the public forgot her, but because the industry decided a black woman past 50 had nothing left to offer. Butterfly McQueen. Butterfly McQueen refused to spit watermelon seeds for a camera, and Hollywood ended her career for it. On the set of Gone with the Wind in 1939, the 28-year-old actress repeatedly pushed back against scenes she found degrading, refusing the watermelon seed gag outright, and objecting to how her character Prissy was costumed. And when Vivien Leigh slapped her hard enough to genuinely hurt during the famous birth scene, McQueen demanded a formal apology and insisted the slap be mimed in every subsequent take. She later summed up the role bitterly. She hadn't known she'd be required to play someone so degraded. Born Thelma McQueen in Tampa in 1911, she took her nickname from a butterfly ballet at Harlem's Lafayette Theater, having trained seriously as a dancer before Hollywood found her. Her refusal to replicate Prissy over and over effectively destroyed her film prospects. Between 1948 and 1968, 20 years, the entire prime of her working life, she received almost no film offers. So she sold toys at Macy's, dispatched taxis in the Bronx, and, in one of history's crueler ironies, worked as an actual maid in Atlanta, the very job her famous character performed. At 64, she earned her political science degree from City College of New York in 1975. She died on December 22, 1995, at 84, after a heater malfunctioned at her Georgia home. The woman who refused to be Hollywood's prissy paid for it with everything. And here is what makes her quietly heroic. She was right. Every scene she rejected in 1939 is one we now teach as an example of what the industry once demanded. She simply knew it, 30 years too early, and Hollywood made sure she starved for the insight. Lincoln Perry. Lincoln Perry is the most complicated figure on this list, and he deserves to be understood rather than simply condemned. Performing as Stepin Fetchit, he built a character out of every stereotype white audiences wanted, shuffling, mumbling, scratching his head in confusion, and he became extraordinarily rich doing it. Born in Key West in 1902 to a Jamaican father and a Bahamian mother, he ran away as a teenager to work minstrel circuits before his 1927 breakthrough in Old Kentucky. And here's what history often forgets. He became the first black actor to receive screen credit in major Hollywood films, and by reported accounts, the first to earn over $1 million. Astonishing money for any actor of that era. He owned multiple homes and a custom pink Cadillac. But the cost to Black America's image was severe. His characters became ammunition for racists, arguing black people were inherently lazy, and the Nakapes condemned his work through the 1930s and 1940s. By the late 1950s, civil rights leaders had pressured studios to stop hiring him entirely. He filed for bankruptcy in 1947, losing nearly everything to mismanagement and lawsuits, converted to the Nation of Islam, and suffered a debilitating stroke in 1976. He died in 1985 at 83. The honest reckoning is uncomfortable. Perry was a man who found the only door Hollywood left open and walked through it, and the damage that door did outlived the fortune he made. Both things are true at once. He was exploited by an industry that profited enormously from the image it paid him to perform, and he chose to perform it. The studios who wrote those scenes faced no reckoning. Only the man in front of the camera did. Louise Beavers. Louise Beavers appeared in over 160 films across 4 decades, and Hollywood cast her as a maid in virtually every one. Born in Cincinnati in 1902 and raised in Pasadena, she had no Southern accent at all, so studios made her fake one, forcing a thick artificial dialect to qualify for the only roles available to a black actress. The indignity went further than her voice. When she lost weight for her own health, casting directors told her plainly she wouldn't be hired unless she looked like the mammy figure white audiences expected, so she deliberately gained it back. Before acting, she had actually worked as a maid for a white silent film actress, and the irony of then spending 40 years portraying maids on screen was never lost on her. Her breakthrough came with Imitation of Life in 1934, playing Delilah, a maid whose pancake recipe makes her white employer rich, and who refuses any share of the profits. The performance drew tremendous critical praise and deep controversy within the black community for the servility it depicted. Many considered it Oscar-worthy. The Academy ignored her completely, handing the first black Oscar to Hattie McDaniel 5 years later. She later played Beulah on CBS radio and television, becoming one of the most consistently employed black actresses in Hollywood, at the precise price of never once escaping a single stereotype. She died on October 26, 1962, at 60. Her career embodied the impossible bargain Hollywood forced on black women of her generation: work as a stereotype, or do not work at all. She worked 40 years with enormous skill and almost no room to use it. And the tragedy isn't that she took the bargain, it's that the bargain existed. Canada Lee. Canada Lee's story proves that in 1950s Hollywood, speaking against racism could cost you your life. Born Leonard Kanagata in New York City in 1907, he lived several lives before acting found him. Champion jockey, then professional boxer, winning roughly 90 of some 200 welterweight fights, until a detached retina ended his career. He came to the stage through Orson Welles' Federal Theater project, breaking through in Welles' 1936 all-black Macbeth, and then as Bigger Thomas in the 1941 Broadway Native Son. Hollywood followed: Hitchcock's Lifeboat in 1944, Body and Soul in 1947, and Cry, The Beloved Country, in 1951, opposite Sidney Poitier, one of the most acclaimed performances of the post-war era. Then McCarthyism destroyed him. Lee was an outspoken civil rights activist, and when the House Un-American Activities Committee demanded he denounce his friend Paul Robeson, he refused. He was blacklisted in 1950. Film offers vanished overnight. The FBI kept him under surveillance, and the financial devastation and ostracism wrecked his health. He developed coronary heart disease that proper medical care could have managed, care he could no longer afford, and suffered multiple heart attacks across 1951 and 1952. He died on May 9, 1952, at his Manhattan apartment, aged just 45. He had been scheduled to begin a major production that very week. The blacklist didn't only end Canada Lee's career, it killed him, at the height of his powers, for the crime of loyalty. He was 45, younger than most actors are when they get their best roles. And the cruelest detail is that he never renounced anyone, never named a name, and never saw the country he loved admit he'd been right. Hollywood didn't merely blacklist Canada Lee, it buried him,